All right, welcome, Donald.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for doing this on somewhat short notice. We had talked about having you as a guest for a long time, and really, especially after that, the retreat, we really enjoyed getting to know you on that, and we've been tagging you as someone we really wanted to have on here, and glad that it all came together this week. How's things been going?
Good. It's obviously a year of a lot of change and a lot of disruption in the larger area and also personally. So there's a lot going on that's positive. There's a lot going on that is reactionary, and I'm excited in 25. We're already in May, but I'm pretty optimistic for the year.
Very cool. Very cool. I'd say I feel similar. I feel similarly like what you said. That's maybe that's something in the just in the energy field or something. Who knows? If you could give us a little background on what I love to start with is maybe just activities and things you did growing up, like sports or any sort of physical activity, and then how it grew into you getting into CrossFit, and then we kind of just jump off there.
Yeah, I was, growing up, it was an interesting dynamic. I had divorced parents, so I was kind of shuttling between Ohio and Texas for most of my childhood and high school. And I kind of took the Ferris Bueller approach, where I was friends with everyone and I tried a lot of things. I wasn't necessarily good at everything, but I gave it a shot. So I was definitely not good at basketball, but I gave that a shot for a couple of years. Baseball. I wrestled for a few years. Did gymnastics growing up. And this is all kind of maybe on the physical side. And then obviously I played the saxophone competitively. I was, student council president. I was in drama, you name it. And it was a different time than I think how parenting is now, where a lot of parents, are much more structured. This was all kind of on me. I just kind of picked some of this stuff up, and kind of ran with it. I was amazed that my single mom was able to actually drop me off and make sure this all kind of worked.
I was going to say that's something every day.
Yeah,
after school.
Yeah, and somehow it just happened, right? And what I love about CrossFit now is that, which I've been doing maybe since 2012, 2013, is that it combines, a lot of those aspects, and it's so varied. So I think I've got a decent attention span, but there's so much going on in the toolbox of what you can work on that it never feels like there's not something to improve. And that's really what I like about it.
So when you kind of talk about all the extracurricular stuff that you did, it's always so when I was in high school, I didn't have a lot of those. And I remember trying to fill out college applications, and then they're like, okay, what is this? What did you do? And I worked a lot, but that's not what they really wanted to see. Where did you go to college? Because that is right what you want to say.
Yeah. Your
extracurriculars.
The funny thing is, I worked a lot as a kid too. So when I went to college, my sister, who's 2 years older, was also in college, but I was the first to graduate from college in my family. She took 6 years, so that's why I kind of lapped over her.
Okay.
But on that working side, I was also maintaining, despite all those extracurriculars, a paper route, babysitting, snow shoveling, lawn mowing. I waited on tables. So it was a lot. And I think, not to get too psychological about it, but my family life wasn't the most functional, and so having all these activities and structure gave a lot of purpose, and also just kind of shielded what probably wasn't the greatest environment, and I just got really busy. Now that being said, it's not the best thing, because now I look back and kind of a lot of my habits, and I'm probably way overcommitted for what I ought to be doing, but it's just this old habit. But for college, I ended up I grew up between Ohio and Texas, kind of between the two parents, and wanted to get out of Ohio as quickly as I could when I turned 18. So I got accepted into George Washington in D.C., moved there, had no friends, no family, no connection to that place. And because they had a great scholarship package, it was, kind of possible at the time, and made it work. And, even during school, worked during the school year and then summer internships to kind of get myself through college.
Wow. That's awesome. And especially like where you were able to kind of do all of these things that got you out of there too. Like it wasn't like you had scholarship offers and things like that where you're like, okay, I've got a way out where.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a big part of how I, view kind of where I am now and where I spend some of my time is paying it forward, given how enabling that was. I mean, even when I was looking at colleges, because, I didn't really have much of a family structure, I had 2 high school teachers that ended up taking me on my college tours for, a couple of them. And we drove several hundred miles to a few different colleges. And when I look back, I didn't think, I obviously respected and was incredibly, grateful for it. But only when I look back on it, I'm like, wow, like,
really cool.
to have, my English teacher and Latin teacher get in the car and take me to the college, for my college tours. Not all of them, but most of them. I was kind of, I think about that now, I'm kind of blown away, right? Because, not to say it couldn't happen today, but now that we're kind of adults and, you look at that, you wonder to yourself, wow, is there a teacher at my kid's high school that would actually do that, today? Kind of thing.
If you were a teacher, would you do that now? That was.
Well, and now, honestly, like I feel like just seeing my children go through school and all the kind of red tape that's put around teachers, and they're not able to kind of speak freely. And I even said this to my daughter's in kindergarten. And she's a little young for her class or grade, and so basically we're trying to decide whether to send her on to first grade or not. And we had this big meeting, and Brandon and I were both confused about what they were really saying. And she's like, "Can we just talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." I'm talking to her, and I'm like, she's like, "Kate, we're not saying that we want to hold her back. We just are telling you all the information." I'm like, I just feel so bad for you because you're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to speak freely. And it really helps in my industry. I'm like, hey, this is what you're doing that's holding you back. You're paying me $700 a month. How much longer do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Like how much longer do you want to wait? It's very freeing to be able to just say things. And it's like, I think to kids' detriment a lot of times that, and I think it's just what society's become where like teachers are so afraid of getting in trouble that they can't speak freely or have a little more compassion or show any sort of like even favoritism. Like, if they did that now, would other parents get pissed because you didn't take my child to college orientation? It's just, I feel like we've created this monster in a way, not to
agreed
divulge on a whole different topic here. But.
Yeah. Well, and part of my persona now is as an educator. I've been a professor for I think my 16th year. In addition to the full-time work that I
can you speak on that just for a little? Like, tell us everything you do.
I don't know if we have enough
whole
time.
rap sheet right now.
Yeah, give us like a 5-minute synopsis of kind of because you do have a lot going.
Yeah,
on.
I'm like now the Ferris Bueller of like adulting.
Everything that he did in high school, he now does as an adult.
Yeah, pretty much.
With big boy, big boy
6 different jobs.
So in my own kind of reflection and years of therapy, because I've lived in New York for 15 years, so you have to have like at least 2 therapists if you live in New York. Is that this overcommitment that we talked about as a kid certainly has translated over into kind of how I live my life now, for better or for worse, right? Obviously, did undergrad. I actually helped put my sister through college too. After school and kind of funded her graduate education. So I stayed in DC, began working in commercial real estate and at a large private equity fund, and then got involved with another fund that is kind of a global investor, working on deals that were all going sideways. And I was the only, I would say, kind of mid-20-something that kind of raised their hand and said, I'll work on these complicated deals and not look at the new deals and work on kind of cleaning up the messes, if you will. And so I got teamed up with this senior director, and it's just me and her on the cleanup team of all these deals that went sideways. And that's what kind of opened my eyes to a new part of the market that I found interesting. So when I went off to grad school, I went up to Harvard Business School and left DC. And that was 2 years, and began working on a kind of a business plan around how to take this knowledge of restructuring and working out deals that had gone sideways, and how to actually make an investment thesis out of this by acquiring deals that have gone sideways so playing offense versus defense, right? And so I pitched that during my summer internship at school. So it's a 2-year program. Everyone spends their summers somewhere. And a large hedge fund in New York was interested in the idea. And so I kind of came on and started working on it and implementing it. It's not permitted in the program, but I ended up working about full-time my second year in New York on the trading desk, and was up in Boston, obviously, for school full-time as well. And on what at the time was the Delta shuttle every week going back and forth. But you were prohibited from working, but I obviously kept it kind of low-key and started building out this strategy. So upon graduation, kind of built for several years this investment thesis and platform around buying busted situations within commercial real estate, and we ended up scaling that to several billion during the financial crisis, and kind of spun out to another fund, started co-running a large part of that, and then eventually started my own business, and got backing from the Harvard Endowment and a few other large investors to do this thing for several years. And on the side, and this is kind of where the teaching came in, and I don't know if we talked about this on the retreat, but I had this near-death experience. I would say, and it was probably, I think it was in the summer of 2008.
You talked to me about it at the spring social, because I was talking to John, who we had on, and you just mentioned yours.
I don't remember
insane.
this story, so no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was in this car accident. It was coming back from a friend's lake house in Pennsylvania. It was like rural PA on I-70 something. And it was one of those little BMW Z4s, if you remember it's like basically a death trap if you're on a highway.
Bigger than a Miata.
Yeah, marginally. Yeah. And my friend Joel, who was driving, something happened with one of the rear wheels, and he literally lost control of the car. And there was a semi right next to us, and the top had been down, and, not to get into the gory details, but I had just put my window up because it was getting a little chilly, and we ended up impacting the truck, and the window was the first point of impact. And then I think we had 21 points of impact after that with all the cars behind us. It was a really, really, kind of crazy string of like maybe 15 or 17 cars that ended up getting involved in this accident. And if you've ever had one of these, you separate from your body, and it was surreal in terms of both the time that stops and this odd sensation that you're outside of your body, and all the noise and kind of movement stopped. This strong sense I had at that time was smell, because you could just smell all this burning rubber and like all this like kind of stuff that was happening, and then it just. You kind of looked and you're like, am I alive or am I not alive right now? And I was alive. And so,
how old were you?
That was, so at that time I was probably 28, 29. Kind of coming out for the first few days of that, was just this immense sense of just gratitude that, wow, and I wasn't injured either. I mean, it was phenomenal. I had, slight head kind of thing, but, on the whole, I kind of walked away. And then it begins settling in, right? At least for me. For some people, they might choose a path of, okay, let me drop everything, go surf, and like life's too short, and, take that avenue.
Not you. You double down on everything.
In some ways, but I said to myself, you cannot forget what happened here, and you also have to really remember that this could all be gone regardless, right? And if it were to all be gone, where do you want to express yourself? What do you want to do? Not out of ego, but just what do you want to do with this life, right? And to the point that we talked about earlier is like, it's not all about me. How else can I impact the larger kind of good, and not in a way that, feels like let's just write a check, right? And so teaching, I knew, was always going to be something. I just didn't quite know how and when. And particularly, given what I mentioned a little earlier about the, some influential people in my life. And so I had a mentor in New York at the time who was on the board at NYU. And we were just catching up over breakfast. And I mentioned to him what had happened, and that I was really trying to find a spot where I could have some impact, but it needs to work with my overall, kind of what I was doing, because it was a pretty intense job at the time. And I was like, and we were just coming into the financial crisis as well. And, he set up a meeting with one of the deans, and I just kind of fleshed out an idea around, well, we're in this dislocating market, and there's nothing at all in this curriculum that's being taught on distressed investing, and that's kind of the label that we would put on kind of the style that I was working in. And I think it would be relevant for students. I think they'd be quite interested, but it'd also be a very good tool for them to be aware of, even if they don't pursue this as their own career, but to be able to, work out distressed situations that they're going to have over the course of their careers investing, right? And so we gave it a go. We experimented with a half semester class, actually up at Columbia, strangely enough. And then NYU also latched on. And so I ended up teaching at both for, from 2009 until I left New York in 2020. So about a dozen years at both, and kind of created this from scratch. And that was what was interesting for me, was to be able to sit down and create a curriculum that wasn't taught anywhere, but also was highly relevant, because I put myself into the shoes of the students. I was like, what is going to be a more powerful class here? And it's the case method, which we tend to use up at Harvard a lot, which means that you're using real facts, real situations, and bringing kind of quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis together. And it's something where it's not at all academic, right? I occasionally would bring in.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Like, how is it not academic?
Well, in the sense that it's instead of talking about theory or talking about equations or talking about, how this might be used in the world, we just used it. And all the cases cases were based on real transactions or investments or deals that we had worked on. We might redact some of the facts so that it couldn't be pinned exactly to a situation, but it'd be irrelevant if we were talking about this office building in New York and just made it in an office building in Chicago. But that wasn't the interesting piece. And it allowed the students to actually go into the facts and circumstances, run the numbers, think about the dynamics, and look at it completely differently.
I want to take this class.
Yeah, I know. This is why I love talking to you. It's like we start off, it's 5. I'm like, I'll just chat with Donald real quick. And it's like 30 minutes later, I'm like, okay, now tell me about this. It's so amazing. That's really cool. So it was about like specific deals that had gone sideways, but were you also teaching, did you see like the recession as an opportunity to then help teach people, like, what do we do in a recession? Because it's also an opportunity.
And everyone was panicking then and
it's
not
also
wanting to invest.
Huge opportunity for anyone with some expendable, cash or, some reserves. It can be a real opportunity.
Yep. Yeah. So the classes started taking on a little life of their own, where they were oversubscribed, because I tried to keep them to 35, maybe 40 students, because it's highly interactive. The way that I like to run a classroom is to keep everyone on their toes. Cold call. Cold call means obviously that you're not raising your hand necessarily, but you're being required to participate, particularly if you've been quiet in the class. And participation was really important.
You're ruthless.
I'm a hard ass in the classroom.
You in the back.
Yeah,
you look half awake.
Yeah, no, but I made it very clear in the first class session that it was going to be an intense class. Expect cold calling, and there's going to be a lot of work. And if this doesn't sound right, please drop, because we're oversubscribed and someone else wants the seat. All good, so I was able to kind of create a room that would have a higher proportion of, let's call it, driven or type A students. I mean, and Columbia, they're already, type A and driven. So it could almost get toxic in some way, if it's like too much, but it became pretty
And
popular.
they're all in therapy now.
Yeah. They all had to survive through me. I hope they're in therapy. So it was relevant. And then even in times when the markets were booming, it was still a particularly popular class because it wasn't necessarily predicated on, I'm going to go out and take this investing style, but it taught just a skill set of how to look at situations, patterns, and analysis a little more skeptically than a lot of the other classes. So they viewed there to be some value in becoming better investors by seeing a lot of things that had gone wrong.
Yeah. Now, this might be a strange question, but how much do you think that your ability to pick up on and recognize these issues and these gaps, how much is that just like your analytical mind, and how much is that like your intuition that there's a gap?
Yeah. It's funny you say, so there's a Nobel Prize winner called Kahneman who just passed recently. And he coined this thing called System 1 and System 2 thinking. And System 1 is the initial reaction to what we call the gut instinct, kind of predicating a lot of what's called cognitive bias. System 2 is what you're saying is this analytical one. And in many situations, not just investing, but in our lives, we're in System 1 and System 2 constantly, right? You're driving a car, you're in System 1, right? Mm-hmm. That's why you can be able to check your email, drink a cup of coffee, navigate the traffic, all right, and yell at your kids in the back, is because it's all System 1 kind of ability. To your question on, seeing what these patterns are, after teaching this class for a while, I started thinking about, well, what else could be interesting around this, not necessarily just looking at distress situations, but this pattern analysis that you're talking about. And I started working on, informally, this framework that's called learning from failure, had kind of planted a few seeds back up at my alma mater, Harvard, around this area, and they took it on. And so I developed now a different class that I now teach up there and commute here from Columbus every week on learning from failure to this point of pattern analysis. And it's when you became excellent at kind of this investing strategy, you had to be good at recognizing patterns because typically you'd have a very short time to evaluate opportunities. You'd have to act with certainty because in this kind of style of investing, if you're working with Goldman Sachs and they want to move, $500 million of mortgage portfolios and have you close in 3 weeks, they're requiring you to say, yes, I'm good, and follow through, right? And so you've got to have some quick instincts that are informed but aren't perfect to be able to kind of get to that point and then go corroborate all this information. And then once you've, closed on these situations, you've got, a playbook of, well, how are we going to deal with these based on how we've dealt with things in the past? And I would kind of teach the team around us, how would we evaluate this kind of borrower or this kind of situation or this based on things that we've seen. And we could easily begin categorizing within 4 or 5 buckets, what might be a few hundred situations into 3, 4, or 5 categories that would, again, not be perfect, but they rhymed a lot, right? And so this learning from failure aspect kind of builds on not just being a pattern recognizer, but being able to, drill down and look at past events. I know we're getting a little deep here, and look analytically and where it becomes powerful if you're able to kind of observe patterns and moderate and control System 1 and System 2 thinking, is that you get cognitive of what cognitive bias is, right? Meaning you understand a little bit of, okay, and are we only looking to things right now that confirm our belief, confirmation bias? Are we only limiting some of our analysis right now to recency bias or what we've seen very recently? Are we, looking at things with a sunk cost fallacy, which means that, well, we've spent this much time on it, we might as well just keep going. There are a lot of, these are just 3. All right. So, it's really finding this ability to control and moderate this system one, system two thinking. When you marry that with the ability to look at and understand cognitive bias, that's another thing we kind of learned in this class is like, what is cognitive bias? And when we say bias, that word itself even is biased, right? Typically negatively, where all it is the human brain will have kind of its own routine of evaluating situations. It's how we survive. Bias is not good or bad. It just is, right? And it's how we can cross a street. It's how we live our lives. It's how in CrossFit we are able to get through a WOD without system two thinking the whole time. It's getting into instinct, routine, reps, all of that, which is all is all positive. But you have to be cognizant of how that affects yourself, your teams, your organizations, and when you're at least aware of these biases and how they affect decisions, then you can start recognizing patterns. And it's not just the recognizing the patterns, it's how do you take that recognition and do something with it, right? And then how do you potentially begin course correcting and or like implementing within systems, but then reinforcing itself with additional evaluation, right? And in business, generally speaking, this is not done, right? And what I find very exciting about some of this work is that if you look at medicine or pharmaceuticals, you look at engineering, you look at some aspects of even the insurance markets, or you look at manufacturing, you look at the military particularly, is that there are parts of this that work well, and they're just part of the DNA of how organizations look at situations. And what we don't do many times, particularly in real estate, which is kind of the vertical within kind of business that I've operated, or really within finance generally, is look methodically at events. And I use the word events versus failure because even just using the word failure alone starts a bias, right? And so, it's opened a little bit of a Pandora's box. So
you can see opportunity. Is
Yeah.
basically what you're saying.
Well, and
Like missed opportunities.
absolutely, and many times, when I discuss this, some of the initial instincts are fear around it, right? Because when you start opening the box of understanding failure or understanding past events, you have got to have an environment around that is legitimately curious about learning, not necessarily going after a scalp, let's say, right, or going after blame, and ideally doing it out of greed, not out of fear, right? And when I say out of greed, meaning doing this because we want to make more money, or doing this because we want to make more market share, not doing this because a compliance department or a risk department is going to come in and have a checklist of things, right? Or arbitrarily kind of evaluate some situations. And that's when the wheels can start turning for people to start thinking about how can we learn better about what we do. Because like, for instance, in elite athletics, and this is a kind of a case that we use and where I'm going to spend some time studying, is, 20 years ago, there really wasn't, any review of the tape in any methodical way or data, right? And today, you can't point to a major sports franchise that isn't doing failure analysis or event analysis. I'm not saying it translates directly into business, but there are definitely some pieces there that are very interesting. And so there were a few early movers or coaches or teams that believed that we can take some analysis here rather than just instinct of what happened at that game, but study the film of that game, study the nutrition, study the training, look at the stats, and synthesize this information and learn from it for the next game or that season, right? Not just, oh, that was a great, good to know, let's move on, and iteratively look at this, right? And, kind of taking it back to the athletics kind of side, there are probably some parallels in training in some ways, right? So you kind of look at this and it seems so obvious to me, but it's not so obvious out there in kind of this finance world that we can take some of this and do this. So they're just looking at
the end product, not everything that led up, basically. Is that what you're saying? Like
many times it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's almost
yeah.
like therapy, but like going through your business like background in a way. I mean, when you're talking about this, it like, to me, it's like very parallel with like I'm in therapy too, and like your inner child work, and it's so painful to do, but it's almost like with your business and like the growth in this story, there's a story there, and there's some, it doesn't have to be good or bad. It just is what made you who you are, but you have to go back through and notice like, hey, this thing happened and this made me fearful of, like, I mean, I just know our story, and there's certain fears that you develop based on past events, but that will hold you back if you don't get rid of them. And they're all developed for survival, just like we develop these things growing up through childhood for survival, but then you don't need those parts of you anymore. So it's like healing the inner child, but it's almost like you're doing that in the business. Yeah. Like healing like these like parts of you.
Yeah, and what's a little unique about the class, because I'm kind of doing work obviously in an academic context, but I'm taking this out into the real world in parallel, right? Is that it's the first forum for most of these students, and these are like graduate students at Harvard, so they're driven, they're accomplished, they've had several years of work experience, they're going to go on and be leaders and hopefully great people for society. Is that part of the kind of assignments for the class are very personally introspective on failure, and not in a way of like, okay, let's just beat ourselves up, but they've never even individually have had to sit, collect thoughts and answer a series of a few questions that are open-ended enough about failure, and many of them will come at the end of the semester and be like, I've never had to ever think about this. And so I say to them, look, this isn't a proxy for this class to be a therapeutic or anything, but if you can't do this for yourself, then there's no way that you're going to be able to do something like this for your team or your organization with any level of authenticity, right? Or else it'll just stay at the first, second, or third layer of the onion, and so this doesn't have to go to this massively organizational, therapeutic realm, but getting in touch with, first with the self and understanding where failure points were, and to look back and not just think about setbacks. There's a big difference between just setbacks or disappointments and failures, right? Yeah. And not look at these all the situations of a silver lining or it was a great to learn from, right? Because there's a misconception, particularly if you do think about failure in business. A lot of people take this venture capital approach, which is fail fast, like move on, get the couple key learnings, and like that builds grit and all this. I'm like, yeah, sure, right? But there's so much more here that methodically can be done with it, right? Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be spun to the positive, right?
I can see how this would be really uncomfortable work. I mean, just sitting down with you and being like super honest and looking at everything. I mean, because you're going to have failures, you're going to screw up, and you're going to, if you can't recognize that, then you can't recognize your patterns and fix them.
Correct. And it's the first step of some, being able to, and again, no one leaves this being an expert in the space or whatever, but maybe someone knows enough to be dangerous and at least has a heightened EQ of some things, right? So I think, it's a success if someone, spends some time with this and just comes out with a greater self-awareness and thinking a little more openly about how to neutrally analyze events, right? Because if you can do that, then you're well ahead of a competitive set. Yeah. Right. And so do it out of greed.
Yeah.
Kate, check your mic real quick. Just talk into it.
Oh, sorry.
No, there you go.
Hear me?
Yeah. I was. It sounded like you were just talking in the air. I just want to make sure it's getting onto this thing here real quick.
So, is that your passion now to teach more than to lead this? I mean, because you have a lot of other things going on.
Yeah. Back to that Ferris Bueller point, right? So I developed a series of investment funds, and just for those that aren't in the business, what you do is you have one company that runs a series of separate companies, which are these funds, right? So I sold my parent company in 2018 to a very large kind of global asset manager. I stayed on, kept running the business, the team, the strategy for a few years, spun it out again to a large insurance company, and then had some options on my time. Again, in parallel, I had been teaching. I've served on a number of boards, both for-profit and nonprofit, and actively mentor a lot of former students. And in some cases, I'll take on roles on advisory boards with their companies, or tactically help them, scale and grow either within their businesses or scale and grow new businesses that they're working on. So that's kind of always been going on. And so I had an opportunity to scale my time, and people are probably wondering, like, well, how the heck did you end up in Columbus and working out at CrossFit Grandview, right? Is that in 2022, the dean at Fisher, which is Ohio State's business school, had reached out. There was an opening that was kind of unexpected at one of our institutes there. And at that same time, the opportunity at Harvard to begin teaching coalesced simultaneous to this. And I had an option based on some contractual things with the last spin out where I could go to 0 on my time if I wanted to. And it was obvious what the answer was going to be. I didn't really have to think hard about it. There are many who operate kind of on Wall Street, and we all have varying degrees of motivations. Mine was never the money, right? I sat back for a bit and I kind of said, well, what's enough, right? What's enough? Incrementally, what would make any further difference on, what you do and how you do it. And that answered itself.
Because teaching's not going to touch.
It's a fraction.
Making that point.
Yeah.
It's a job, but it doesn't touch what you were doing.
I easily had another 10, 12, 15 plus years of what I could have continued doing. But for me, I came down to the purpose of what's intriguing. And it's not charitable. When I do the work, it's not like I'm doing it out of pure altruism. I love the challenge. I love stepping up and thinking about new ideas. I like going and pushing people. I'm a starter of things. So even at Ohio State, kind of starting initiatives, working with them on new executive education offerings, or looking at totally new classes for the undergrads. So it's I view it with the same level, for better or for worse, of kind of intention and intensity as I did on Wall Street. And the issue, and this is what kind of where we even started our discussion, is that it's difficult to find space, right? So one of the areas I find space is here at CrossFit Grandview. I mean, in all seriousness, this is, if you ever see me here, I'm never checking a device while I'm here. And it's one of the few times of the day where I go, and I, am away from obligations, and have an ability to kind of be back. Just it's me, it's the body, it's improvement on whatever it's going to be for that day, and to be present. And I think not to get too philosophical, but I think there's a much larger macro thing that we're grappling with today about just presence, right? Like, how is one present? And so I don't think it's going to get easily solved, but for me on a daily basis, this place helps kind of center me on presence, and it's kind of an anchorage in terms of stuff outside of the 12 or 13 professional identities that I'm kind of managing around all these things, where I come and it's democratic, right? I mean, I tend not to share a lot about what I do on the floor. I just engage with people and have a good workout, have fun, joke with the coaches every now and then, and try to be as level as possible here, and make it a great experience. And that's, I think, not to put a plug in for this place, but what's fantastic is, one, I've seen a lot of CrossFit boxes because I travel a lot, so I drop in all these places. And I don't know that people appreciate actually at how well equipped and well coached this box is. Seriously, I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, I know, and I'm not just saying, like, it's incredible. People have a hard time finding even little bits of presence or community in this environment. I think what's here is an ability for people to have a consistent group of shared interest, and an ability to kind of connect mind and body, and in CrossFit, thankfully, you can't really have AirPods in or be checking your email, right? Everyone has to kind of check out. It's not like going to another fitness venue where
I'm glad you're kind of saying this.
People aren't
really
really checked in.
Yeah, everybody, please take note of this.
Yeah.
No,
when
but
coming here.
just
Yeah.
even talking about the presence aspect, because it is something I notice, like if, say, we do have to go to maybe a commercial gym space or something, if we travel, and it is still, everyone is very connected to devices. Like they've got music on, between sets, they're on their phone. And I'm like, the feel of here is very much like, it just reminds me of 15 years ago where like the headphones are off, people are engaging, you're in class, you're talking. And it's so hard to do that in just day-to-day life now. It's that hour or 2 hours every day that you have where, like, you know, my phone's in the cubby.
Yeah,
you know,
that's why I love it.
you don't even see it. You know,
Yep.
I really think like that's something that isn't really talked about that much, because I'll even wake up from sleep sometimes and I'm like, oh, I was on my phone too much yesterday. Like I could feel it. You know, I was like, because I was disconnected for that, 8-9 hours. And I'm like, I feel different. I need to stay away from that thing.
Yeah. No, it's, I think, again, one of our earlier points of just, some of the, how heavy some things are right now, but still being optimistic about, things is, if you can liberate a little bit off that and try to be present, right? It's remarkable.
Smaller. Yeah.
Remarkable.
Yeah. Well, your energy always is like so infectious to me, and I really appreciate you being a part of this community. I mean, anytime I see you in the gym, it just like lifts my spirits. Anytime I see you out at a party, for sure, it lifts my spirits. So we're really thankful to have you. Yeah, no, you guys have cultivated an amazing environment here. I'm pleased to be a part of it, and looking forward to accomplishing a few more goals here. But thanks for the opportunity.